Has left-wing media been hiding a trans terror cult? If you're on the left, have you even heard about this at all? This story that's been going on since at least last year?
The thing that I noticed about the Zizian cult is that it kind of hit all the major points that will set somebody up to be involved in that. You've got transgender human beings, all right? So you're dealing with sexuality, you're dealing with sexual identity, and you're dealing with sex, right? Anytime you deal with those things, you've already got someone, as they say, by the Titan curlies, right? So that's the first.
I mean, I guess technically being transgender has to do with sex, but I mean, being heterosexual also has to do with sex. So if there's a heterosexual group of men that are going around committing violent crimes and acting in a cultish way, is it relevant that they're heterosexual? Or is their sexuality only relevant when it's trans? Curious.
First thing. The second thing is they were on a restrictive diet. In this case, it sounds like they were vegan. So when you start to mix in the sexual aspect, then with a restrictive diet, now what you're doing is behavior control. A friend of
I will acknowledge this is the first valid point if you're trying to make a cult argument. It's actually one of the potential pushbacks at calling MAGA a cult, as I often do. It is not a requirement to have a special diet, but it is something that you will find common among cults where they eat certain things, they isolate themselves from family, and so on and so forth. Not a major clue, but it's certainly much more relevant than the fact that they're trans.
mine is named Steve Hassan, Dr. Steve Hassan, and he got involved with the Moonies back when he was in his 20s. He was in it for a couple of years, got out, dedicated his life. He's one of the to helping people understand cults, and he's a psychologist and a really nice guy. And he came up with the BITE model of authoritarian control. And B is behavior, I is information, T is thought, E is emotion. Right. So behavior, you've got veganism, and you've also got the sexuality part of it. Right. So I'm sure there was a lot of sleep deprivation going on also, which affects your thoughts, which affects your emotions, which also affects your...
Okay, buddy. Let's get people up to speed. If you're not a far right person who's been watching weirdos like Andy No, and this has been a big story for him. He's a right wing weirdo. He's not a weirdo because he's right wing. He's just a weirdo because he's a weirdo.
Meet Brie. She's always saying, I'll do it someday.
I don't care about his ideology. This has nothing to do with his ideology. It's just him. He looks like a guy who is just unwell. If he were a left-wing guy pushing some progressive things or whatever, I'd be saying the same goddamn thing. He just does not look right. I mean, this does not look like the kind of person that I'd want to hang out with. I'm pretty sure the feeling is mutual. Something's off about this kid. I don't know what his deal is, but for those of you guys that don't know about him, he's got this obsession with Antifa. Everything is Antifa. He goes to sleep dreaming about Antifa. I don't know if it's like a sexual thing, if he's sexually attracted to the Antifa movement or whatever his problem is, but he's just look at Unmasked, Inside Antifa. This is his whole YouTube channel banner, right? So it's basically his identity. I mean, he has chosen to identify his entire channel. I guess he's promoting his book, which is talking about Antifa. Got the little flag there. Inside Antifa's radical plan to destroy democracy. Won't be hearing from him about any plans from the right wing to destroy democracy. There's nothing Donald Trump could do that Andy knows is going to be like, Donald Trump is gone too far or whatever, right? Conveniently, he seems to be only focused on the left and how horrible they are, and Antifa this and BLM that and whatever nonsense. And this apparently is how he makes a living. He calls himself an independent journalist, but really This is all he ever wants to talk about. He's all up in Portland. Ooh, trans for Palestine. There's some trans video. Portlanders, blah, blah, blah. Antifa promises to get Andy No's book. Antifa continues. Like, that. I guess that's his beat. Talking about Antifa and BLM, I guess.
An elderly couple in Pennsylvania.
But as far as this ZIZ cult that he's calling a trans cult, well, let me let you hear about them, and then I'll tell you my thoughts on that.
Murder in Vallejo connected to the killing of a Border Patrol agent in Vermont, an elderly couple in Pennsylvania, and a fringe group in the Bay Area. I've been working with my colleagues at the Chronicle to make it all make sense for you. Let's go back to November 2019. A radical offshoot of the rationalist movement called the ZIZians staged a protest against the Center for Applied Rationality while dressed in black robes and Guy Fawkes masks. ZIZ, the group leader, who's also known as Jack Lasota, and 3 associates were arrested: Emma Borhanian, Gwen Danielson, and Alexander Leatham. Fast forward almost 2 years, ZIZ and the associates.
So I just want to add a detail. When I first heard about this, I think I posted on my community page, heard him talking about this trans cult. The guy's a weirdo, so I automatically was just dismissive and like, oh boy, here he goes calling something trans. But because I'm objective and I like to know what the truth is and actually understand what's going on rather than push certain rhetoric, I looked into it. You know, is this really a trans cult? Right? That's the question I had. You know, when things are presented negatively about the left in right-wing media, the audience members just sit there and just eat it up. Oh, yeah, the left is radical, whatever. If you watch a left-wing channel, they're talking about, you know, right-wingers are racist. They just eat it up, right? You only have skepticism when it's the other side. That's not me, right? He's saying that these are trans, as a trans cult. So rather than me just dismissing it, I said, let me look into it and see if it's really a trans cult or is he just making it up? Turns out it's not completely made up, although he might be doing the same kind of thing you might see in mainstream media, which is sensationalizing. Interesting. Independent media folks like to talk about how they're so much better than mainstream media. But here's the truth. First, I said, so the leader is a trans guy. So because the leader is a trans guy, that makes it a trans cult? Weird. But then I kept digging, and I kept finding out that there were statements made that there were many members who were trans. So I said, okay, but is that actually true? How do we know that many members are trans? I'm not going to be conclusive. Like, I don't get paid to do this. I have more important things to worry about in my life. But I did spend some time trying to dig into it, and from all the evidence that I've found, it does appear that there are many people in this group who are in fact trans. How relevant is that? I'll comment on that in a second.
File a federal lawsuit against Sonoma County, Westminster Woods, and the 2 deputies. They say they were wrongly arrested, abused, assaulted, and mocked for being transgender. In August of 2022, ZIZ allegedly dies in a boating accident in San Francisco Bay, according to an obituary in a Fairbanks, Alaska newspaper.
So some trans people are upset that they are being mocked for being trans. They are being mocked and harassed. I wonder why that would be. I wonder if there's anything that anyone in this country might be doing that might lead to them being targeted. Certainly doesn't justify anything they did. However, I think it's relevant to be considered.
Then in November, Leatham, Borhanian, and Dow allegedly attacked their Vallejo landlord, Curtis Lind, with one impaling him with a samurai sword through his chest. Lind shoots 2 of his assailants, killing Borhanian. Lind survives the attack, but is left blind in one eye. Leatham and Dow are charged with murder and attempted murder. A few months later, in Chester Heights...
That was pretty disgusting. And it gets even more disgusting because he survived with one eye, but it gets worse.
Pennsylvania, Richard Zatko and his wife Rita are found shot to death in their home. And Jack Lasota, the namesake of the Zizian movement, was arrested in the state as police investigated that crime, indicating that ZIZ was actually very much alive. Remember the federal lawsuit ZIZ filed in 2021? That's now dismissed because the plaintiffs are unwilling to pursue further action. In November of last year, Teresa Youngblood and Maximilian Snyder applied for a marriage license in Washington state. It's unclear if they ever got married. The couple went to high school together in Seattle and studied computer science at prestigious universities. We'll get back to them in a second. On January 17th, 2025, Curtis Lynn, the Vallejo landlord, is attacked and stabbed yet again. This time, Lynn dies from his injuries. We talked to a man who works at an auto body shop.
So they went back, attacked this guy, and this time they killed him. They already attacked him, took out an eye, and now they went back and killed him. Absolutely disgusting. I'm not going to play the full video. It's not very long. You guys can go take a look at it yourself. It is ZIZ case linked to deaths of Bay Area landlord, 5 others. So, first of all, it looks like this group is responsible for killing 6 people. And the fact that this is across the country, I think it is a shame that this is not really getting coverage. I know for a fact if this was a white nationalist cult going around doing this, right-wing media would be trying to pretend like they don't exist or they're not really white nationalists, they're Antifa. Meanwhile, left-wing and liberal media would be all over it. Oh my goodness, these white nationalists are going around killing people. This is a disgrace. Unfortunately, because this is getting tied up with the trans people or the fact that they're trans, it is sort of a off-limits story. I presume it's not a coincidence that it's not being covered, but that is a double-edged sword. There is a valid reason to be hesitant to cover this story, and there's also an invalid reason. The invalid reason is because it is potentially making your side look bad. I don't know that these people are actually left-wing. I didn't see any evidence that says that they're actually left-wing. The only thing is that they're trans. Generally speaking, the right is opposed to trans and the left is supportive of trans. So by that loose logic, it's kind of like, as a left-wing media person, you might be hesitant to talk about this. But there is a valid reason to be hesitant to talk about this, and that is that you don't want to validate certain narratives. Because the fact that there's a bunch of trans people in this apparently cult, how relevant is that, right? This seems to me to be not unlike back in the day, maybe 50, 60, 70 years ago, or a little bit longer than that, where a group of brown-skinned people who might be doing bad things, violent things, criminal things, that story might be latched onto by certain people to show how these Negroes are worthless, and it's a black group, it's a group of blacks, these evil blacks, as if the fact that they have brown skin is relevant to the conduct. Same thing here, right? Typically, people associate with like-minded people, and also people that are in close proximity to. So, you hear ridiculous arguments about black-on-black crime. I mean, there's a lot of areas where a lot of brown-skinned people live next to each other, and because there's criminal people in all groups and all over the country, when those criminal people commit crimes, guess who they're going to be committing crimes against? Guess who they're going to be killing? Their neighbors, their friends, their families. And they're going to be basically committing block on block because that's who they're around, right? Just like the same reason why there's a lot of white on white crime, because a lot of white people, or pink-skinned people live next to pink-skinned people. So when the criminal element of the pink-skinned class commits crimes, guess who they're committing crimes against? Other pink people. Pink on pink crime, brown on brown crime. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous, It's kind of like, Chicago on Chicago crime, or Or Kentucky on Kentucky crime, what's wrong? Why is it that you have all these Kentucky people committing crimes against other Kentucky people? Well, perhaps because the people in New York are too far away. I don't know, man. But once again, I don't see the relevance that they are trans. Now, if there was a pattern of behavior, like we keep seeing multiple trans cults, there's multiple trans people that are doing things. So there's some kind of data to suggest that there's a connection between the sexual orientation and the criminal behavior. Then you got something, right? But that's not what I see. I see a group of people that have chosen to target a certain group, and based on that, I feel many in the influencer class have chosen to target them for profit reasons because they get good clicks on it, right? Like right now, if you're a right-wing media person, if a trans person anywhere does something bad, you're going to get good clicks on that, right? They already primed this environment where, oh, trans, right? So you're going to get clicks on that. So you're going to over-report, just like I mentioned with the airline crashes. You have a major airline, you have planes crash all the time. Nobody cares about random plane crashes in terms of clicks. I'm just being blunt and honest. It's not a big story that a random plane crash, unless a big plane crash has happened recently, just like we had in DC, big plane crash. Now, if a single engine plane with one random, 80-year-old guy crashes, that's going to get more clicks now because of the DC crash, right? So it's the same thing with the trans stuff, right? You keep talking about trans and focusing on it and making it like, oh, there's an issue with trans. That becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy to where, now anytime a trans person does something, you don't get more clicks because it's validating the rhetoric that you're pushing out there. You're pushing out rhetoric that there's something devious and deviant about these trans people, right? So anything that validates that, they're going to be like, again, more trans people. It's the same effect, right? So this is why someone who watches a lot of right-wing media, hearing my arguments that I just made, will disagree with me and say there is a pattern, right? Because to them, they keep hearing about trans people doing things, right? Just like how people right now think that planes are just falling out of the sky, not realizing that, they were falling out of the sky before, we just weren't being told about it, right? Same thing here. There's all kinds of groups of people, from heterosexuals to trans people to gay people, to lesbians to brown-skinned people, pink, all kinds of groups of people that are doing all kinds of bad things. You can choose to focus on any one of these groups, right? Every time, let's say autistic people, right? I'm sure there's been autistic people doing some really disgusting things. You can choose to, focus on that, and the algorithm will help you. If it sees you like stories about autistic people doing things, it's gonna show up in your feed before anybody else's, right? And you keep reporting, oh, another autistic guy did something else, and another autistic guy doing something else. And then when someone who's outside of that bubble says, hey man, you guys are over-reporting on that and acting as if there's an issue with autistic people being violent, but there's no evidence. And they'll say, what are you talking about? Every day I'm hearing a story about an autistic person. Just the other day, there was an autistic guy that shot somebody in the face, right? It's the same exact thing. If you're watching right-wing media that is, picking on, and this is what for-profit media does, whether it's mainstream or independent, left-wing or right-wing, this is what they do, right? They're trying to focus on whatever gets them clicks. So if you're TYT, more so back in the day than now, and you make money from race baiting, every time a racial story comes around, you're on top of it. Stories that aren't racial, you'll make it racial just to get money, get from the clicks, right? Because your audience is primed to, oh, this guy's racist, that guy's racist, right? You right-wing media, you're trying to make money from woke. So it could be something that is technically woke based on your previous definition, or something that's not woke at all, but somehow you can make some kind of connection that is woke. You can just make a video and say, this woke thing happened, and totally illogical, totally inconsistent with what you've been saying before about wokeness, but putting woke in the title, oh my goodness, right? And then if you keep doing that, your audience is going to get this perception that, oh, everything is woke, the world's woke, and we got to kill this woke, and DEI this, DEI, right? Just like with these race baiters, like what is this guy named Dr. Richie? Every day it's some racist guy does this, some racist guy does that. Which is a shame because there are actual issues with racism, but then when you focus on it and over-report on it, you're giving people a warped perception, which does not match reality. You have the right wing distorting it to act like there's no issues, and we're beyond racism for the most part, with few exceptions. And then you have people on the left that are over-reporting and focusing on it in a way because of profit, right? That's the whole thing, is profit, and being dishonest, stretching things to make it racist. So then it destroys it, because then you have one half of the media making it that it doesn't exist, so their audience thinks that everything's fine. Then you have another half of the media that's being dishonest about it, so people are looking and thinking, wait a minute, man, you guys are not being honest about it. So then when actual racism happens, who's going to trust it, right? Who's going to trust it? Right-wing media and their audience, they're going to be like, nah, man, that's nonsense, right? People on the left who kind of are woke, realizing some of this race baiting stuff, they're going to be like, come on, guys, right? It's not a good thing. So, again, the fact that these guys are a bunch of trans people, I don't see that's relevant. I think what is relevant is you have something that seems to be a cult. The fact that they killed 6 people and that they were across the country doing this thing, I mean, it has as much relevance as any other scandalous, violent story of criminals going around committing crime. But again, double-edged sword in terms of, on the left, you might not want to cover it because it might be associated with your side, whether fairly or not, and you don't want your side to look bad. On the other half, it's a thing of trying to be responsible as far as doing your journalism. You know that the right wing is sort of smearing this and trying to make it a trans thing and using it to further attack and demonize trans people. So if you also report on it, you're getting more eyes into this. So maybe there's someone on the liberal side who has been dismissing the right wing and, oh, it's nonsense. And then you report on it, and then they're like, wait a minute. Maybe there is something to what these right-wing people have been saying. And then because, we have some really good propagandists in the right-wing media, that person might end up watching one of their videos and be like, I think trans people are a problem. And you would have helped to make the problem even worse. So it's a little challenging for people that are not reporting on it because of trying to do the right thing. For the ones who aren't reporting on it because of tribal or partisan reasons, I mean, you guys are hacks. But for the other guys, I do respect and understand the complexity. I mean, I tried my best to cover this in a nuanced way, in a truthful way. But I also have a very small audience, and I always will have a small audience. So I'm not under as much pressure as the bigger channels would. If I had a big channel, it'd be a little bit more difficult for me to think about how do I want to cover this, or if I want to cover it. I can't cover every single thing. You make editorial decisions about what you cover and what you don't cover. And this is a difficult topic because of all the dishonesty coming from right-wing media. I definitely would be sensitive to validating their dishonest arguments. And I'd need to take some time to think about what's the best approach. Can I cover it in a nuanced way that's not going to help to validate dishonesty coming from right-wing media? Or should I just leave it alone? I mean, every life has value. But in the grand scheme of things, I think the cult's relatively small. I hate to say it, but it's only 6 people that died. I don't think this is like a major movement, so it's not something that is like I mean, all the things happening in this country and the amount of people that are affected by these various things, this just can't come high on the list. Right? This does not come high on the list. So that's the other thing. Out of all the things you could cover, the decision to cover this and not cover other things, because again, you can't cover everything, so you have to make a decision to choose what you're going to cover. So the decision process to choose to cover some random cult, with a bunch of members that happen to be trans people, which covering it responsibly, I wouldn't focus on the fact that they're trans. I don't see how that's relevant to the story. It's no more relevant than if it was a cult of heterosexuals. Like, ooh, look, another group of heterosexuals doing crazy things, right? So perhaps that's the answer. You simply cover what's happening, and you don't focus on something that is not really relevant. So you say there's this weird guy, it's a weird vegan cult, and they're going around killing people and blah, blah, blah. Of course, right-wing media are going to look at that as you're trying to suppress the truth. But, let them do, they're always going to do that, right? But at least they can't say you're not covering the story, right? Like I could say now, this is not really being covered by a lot of left-wing or liberal media channels. I haven't heard from it. I haven't heard anything about this except for Andy No. The only reason I even know about this is because this is a bipartisan channel. This is a apolitical channel. And because of that, I follow everyone from the far right to the far left and everyone in between, right? So Andy No, the weirdo, I subscribe to his channel, so I see his stuff coming up in my feed. That's why I posted about it recently. So think about someone like me who's obsessed with politics, always watching videos. And the only reason I know about this is because I specifically was following this weirdo. So meaning, I think next to no one else, who's not in that right-wing bubble is gonna know about this, right? So that's also part of it. As opposed to left-wing media hiding from this, I think many of them are not even aware, because how would they be aware of it? I mean, technically it's on Yahoo. Yahoo has it, but who's watching Yahoo for stuff? These guys are following, left-leaning people on Twitter, and the algorithm is feeding them certain things. This is not something that they're going to get. The people they follow are not going to be talking about it. The algorithm's not going to push it to them because there's no pattern of them being interested in trans cult stuff or anti-trans stuff. So the reality is most left-wing media folks probably have never heard anything about this, but I'm pretty sure a few of them are aware of it and are choosing not to cover it. I would guess that's the smaller group. I think most people on the left have not heard anything about it because, again, I really watch a lot of political media, and I'm not even hearing about this from the other right-wing knuckleheads that I follow. I follow a lot of right-wing, Stephen Crowder, Ben Shapiro, Tim Pool. I'm not saying that they didn't cover this at all, but I'm saying it didn't pop up in my feed anywhere. So even me following the far-right people, it didn't pop up to me except for Andy No. Andy No is the guy. He's the guy that why it popped up for me. Anyway, this is the Debate Me channel. Debate Me in the comment section below. Click on the like button, subscribe, smash that bell. Be well.